I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today is Friday, October 21st, 2022. And I'm still thinking about and feeling the wonderful glow of our conversation last week. We had Dr. Peterson joining us directly from South Africa. She's a friend and a colleague of Dr. Oliver Williams, and Brenda's written a wonderful story on last week's program. But I thought it was such a great conversation and a great opportunity to learn and to listen. And hopefully, over the course of today's program, I'd love to have Brenda reflect on the article she wrote and her thoughts as she was writing, as she was reporting, and Dr. B, the same thing. So let me begin by saying hi to my writing partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray, and hello to my co-host, Dr. Bravada, Garrett-Akinsanya. Good afternoon to both of you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Dr. B.
Hey, how you doing, Sister Brenda?
So let's do this as we always do, Dr. B, and begin with the protocol, and I'll hand the talking stick to you.
Okay, thank you. As we do every week when we gather, we see ourselves as being in circle. And although we're not physically in a circle, spiritually we are. And African people, we use circles because there's no beginning or end. And everyone in the circle is connected to one another. And in the circle, as you sit in the circle, everyone has an access to the center, which is the space of power. So every voice is eligible to be heard, is honored and respected and valued. And as African people, in an orderly way, when we speak in conversation, we use a talking stick. And that stick, as you hold it, gives you voice and lets everyone know that to stop and pay attention to what we're hearing. And in this process, since we don't have a physical stick, we always use a virtual stick that takes us across miles and conditions, all the way to South Africa last week. So our talking stick is a sacred part of our connection. And we know that no matter who's in the circle, that voice is given and honored. And we also work as we sit in this space, recognizing that our elders are to be honored because we stand on their shoulders. And as we stand on their shoulders, we recognize and honor our elders and our ancestors. Because we honor our elders because they're closest to our ancestors. We honor our ancestors because they're closest to our Creator. And so as we go looking at that space of belonging and healing and growing, this healing circle is always a space where every voice is heard, every voice matters, and we feel loved and connected, which is the source of all healing for all people. So that's how we introduce it. And often we may call names and say the word Ashe, which means thank you or welcome to the spirit of those who have poured into each of us. And today we think about the spirit that was poured into us of fire last week when Dr. Elizabeth joined our circle, and how we were left feeling motivated and inspired. And we bring that inspiration today in a special space. For me, I've talked all day to the idea of overcoming and where we are now as an African people, where we're getting ready to vote. And many of us are feeling very shut down and lost. And I think as a psychologist, I think a lot of times about our research. And one of our most famous pieces of research is this construct called learned helplessness. And we often hear people refer to learned helplessness, but we don't really know where it came from. And in our studies, we found that this doctor, his name is Seligman, he's a Jewish brother. And quick in his feeling and in his spirit is the remembrance of the Holocaust of his families and elders in his community. And he was looking at the impact of pain and reward on behavior. So he was doing a study where he had dogs would be shocked every 20 seconds when they got shocked, they would be motivated to push a lever to escape the shock. And so he was looking at how quickly they learned to escape the shock. So he would do it, and the dog would hit the lever, jump over, and the gate would come up, and they could escape to the other side. And on the other side of that box were pellets of doggy goodies. So they would not only avoid pain, but be rewarded for avoiding the pain. And then they'd get over there, and the shock would come again. They'd hit that lever and go back over to the other side. And when they went back to the other side, now they'd get goodies again. Every time the shock came, they had to hit the lever to escape it. And so one day in his lab, because the thing was counting on its own, he just went down to get a drink or something for his lunch. And while he was down there, the door got stuck. And the dog kept getting shocked every 20 seconds. And the dog would hit the lever, and the door wouldn't come up. He'd hit that lever. The door would never come up. And finally, he just hit it and just gave up. So when Dr. Silverman came back to the lab, he saw that the dog wasn't hitting the lever when he was shocked. And then he realized that the door was stuck. So he says he put WD-40 and fixed the door so it'd come up and down to resume the trials. Well, what happened then is the dog would sit there when the shocks came. And he said, he doesn't know the door opens now. So he raised the door up so the dog could see to the other side that the door would work. And as he resumed the trials, the dog still did not even try to hit the lever. He had learned to be helpless. He had learned no matter what he would do, nothing would change his fate. Nothing could change his condition. And that, to us as psychologists, is one of the primary bases of depression, is a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And so I say that notion of learned helplessness does not just sit in the lab. It extends to many of our people, our Black brothers and sisters, our brown brothers and sisters, those of us who are often not included when the goodies are being given out. We are included when the shock is there, but not the reward. And so a lot of us have learned it's no need to vote. It's no need to do something to protest. They're not going to do anything. And so we learn to be helpless. And so what I want to say is that as we've learned to be helpless, we can unlearn to be helpless. We can unlearn that helplessness, and we can learn to be optimistic. We can learn to claim our power. We can claim our resilience that has taken us through many doors being shut and locked. And if those doors weren't shut and locked, Rosa Parks wouldn't have stood up. If that door hadn't been shocked and locked, we wouldn't have seen Sister Ketanji on the Supreme Court. It's a lot of doors that have been shut and locked. And we continue to take shock, but we can get out. And if the door won't open, we can break it down. Yeah. So that is what I'm saying today, overcoming, bringing that spirit that holds us, drives us, heals us, creates us as a powerful people. And with that, I pass my talking stick to my sister Brenda.
Can you see her on the pulpit, Al? She just made a sermon. Do you hear me? So I'm saying amen, ashe, and everything else you can think of. Unbelievable, Dr. B. I enjoyed writing about Dr. Peterson. I put, as Al might say, I put my foot in it. But she inspired me so. And one of the lines that I used was she presented a mystical ambience about her. Yes. And it went beyond confidence. It was like, excuse me, God was sitting up in heaven with my ancestors, and they said, you do this. This is your charge. If it bothers you, if it disturbs you, then God is telling you, you have to do something about it.
That's right.
That helped me as a 75-year-old lady who has seen a bunch of HELL for, and especially the past year, and worrying about my daughters, even though they're grown. Our Black kids, our Black millenniums are suffering, and they're confused. They're even confused about the vote. And if you listen to Dr. Peterson, people are confused about spirituality and that connection, because if we're not connecting with our brothers and sisters, how are we loving our neighbors and our family? So we are not connecting with our Creator. I started the article with, and I write about it every time I write about you, but when I wrote about our ancestors and the way our protocol is with the healing circle, so many people need that right now. Yeah. I have friends now who are really struggling with a 33-year-old who was just at the community garden on a Monday and took his life on a Tuesday. And he reminded, my boss, it reminded me so of Douglas, is it Eckhart? How do you pronounce his last name?
Ewart, Doug Ewart.
Yeah. Unbelievable artist. That picture that was on the front cover, the buttons, the different sizes and stuff. And if you can't connect with that type of artistry and where we've come from, I mentioned it yesterday in the show, we have to remember we're some of the most creative, innovative, scholarly people on this planet. That's right. We are. We might not have had the opportunity to study like them, but it came naturally. So this was a good thing. And I felt that ambiance of her. Oh, yeah, that's him. I love that picture. And every one of those buttons, you can just see with his mind, he would have an explanation. Because Dr. B, anyone that can play music with butt pans, he's got my vote. Believe me, he was just unbelievable. Thanks, Vash. It's good to see that. But she was phenomenal. Yes, and I think Al was just like taken, or you were taken back about, you said, sister, how did you get 9 different denominations together? We can't even get one together. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm going to pass it to my boss. Well, oh my goodness. But I loved it. And I worked hard on that piece because I wanted everything that she had to say to come out. And one of the things was when the children and the mothers came in, and she said, I don't think they've seen a Black male outside of abuse or neglect or violence. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was so powerful. I mean, I learned a lot from her. And it was just the way she moved. It was like, this is the way I'm supposed to think. Mm-hmm. This is what my parents had to give me inside. And my parents did the same. My parents had 8th grade educations. They were self-taught like many. But my goodness, they held us up. We rose. And when we got to the point where we felt like we were going to fall, we could feel it. Mm-hmm. Nope, you can't fall. You can't lay flat on your face. You have to rise. And that's what she did. I mean, that's unbelievable, her work and her traveling. And she tickled me about the submission. You know, is that the way that you interpret Ephesians? Because I'm not interpreting it that way. I'm saying that women need to have power, and we do have power. You might be the head of the household, but I'm running this household. Does that remind us of Maxine McFarlane? it was like, she was such a community activist, and our parents set such high expectations for us. We better not sway. But then we had teachers that had high expectations for us. And we had a principal in 1957, 1958 saying, you better have a book in your satchel. We didn't have book bags, but we had to have a book, a comic book. He didn't care what we read. Al read the newspaper to Big Al, but it was like, you better read every day something, not necessarily in class.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a powerful time to grow up. Was it painful? Yeah, because we don't get Emmett Till out of our psychic, and Al and his cousins don't get, what was the police name, Al?
Big Red.
Big Red, who would drop them off on a road and tell them to walk back. I mean, we had those memories, but boy, we were tough. There wasn't anyone that was going to tell us we couldn't do it. And most of us did. But we had that spiritual link.
Let me take that as a cue, Brenda, to do some reading in the newspaper. And the fun thing is I'm reading my newspaper. And
isn't that great?
Yeah, it's really great. And
I'm a long way, Charlie, 40 years.
Reading your story.
That is something.
So, I own the newspaper. I'm reading a story by you, my friend, and we're talking to the world. And I think it says that change is afoot. I'm going to go into part of the story that you've talked about already, but you did a great job in laying this out, and I want to share it because I think what you said and how you said it is really good. So you started by talking about the protocol. Great account of what we do and how we do what Dr. B just did in opening this program. But then you read about Dr. Peterson. This is quoting you now, your story, I'm reading it. Dr. Peterson described meeting Dr. Williams as a gift, acknowledging his work as one of the first scholars doing culturally specific work in the field of domestic violence. After meeting Peterson, visiting her in Cape Town, South Africa, and seeing her work with the South African Faith and Family Institute, it's called SAFI, seeing that in action, Williams welcomed her to the U.S. on several occasions over 2 decades, enabling her to share her story and the essence of her work with the faith leaders of 9 denominations. You quoted her saying, I had a calling when I was very young, holding fast to the belief that we must nurture people, Peterson said. In my teenage years, it was clear I was supposed to work with men who abused their intimate partners, and that I had to work with religious leaders on the faith dimensions of gender-based violence.
I thought that was so powerful.
Patriarchy and the common exclusionary practice of male-dominated religious leadership that is still in place today. Let me read a little more. We'll talk. Women have seldom been regarded or encouraged to be faith leaders, nor is that my role. I work with religious leaders, coming alongside them to strengthen their capacity as they intervene with individuals and families that painfully have been affected by such dysfunction. You write, after graduating as a social worker in 1993, the first job Peterson embarked upon was in a shelter for abused women and children in South Africa. It was a time right at the brink of the end of apartheid. Most of the women who came with their children were Black. It was clear to her then that their children had probably never experienced a Black man that had not been violent and abusive, she said. Open quote. I recall how my 8 siblings and I came home from school or church quite often complaining that all that about all that was wrong with apartheid society living, our parents pointed out, you're disturbed about whatever is wrong because God wants you to do something about it. That's what you just said, Brenda. It was their extraordinary wisdom, not garnered from formal education, but by their faith and seldom given certain issues energy that they could not control. Let me read it again. So their attitude was shaped by both their faith and also the ability to not give energy, to not focus on things that they couldn't control. So that was the heritage they left inside of us, Dr. Peterson said, to be the voice for those who had little freedom to speak, to change the direction of their lives as well as ours. I'll read a little more a little later, but think back on that, Brenda, as you hear me reading your words, and you've talked about them in advance, what comes to your mind?
I just think that some of the things that she pointed out, I mean, of course, we hear it from Dr. Bravada, Garrett-Akinsanya. She sort of like echoes her sometimes. But I didn't think of some of those things that she pointed out. And especially when patriarchy just, like open up like a lily, those star lilies that I love to watch open. The more she talked, the more I was saying, aha, because I hadn't thought of the scriptures that way. I hadn't thought of the fact of the image that children have when they walk in church because all they saw were men. So to see a woman on the pulpit and speaking the word was an oddity for these children. So did it click in that, they were like the white, what did the beautiful African girl call it? She didn't call it white supremacy, with savagery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it became very clear that up until maybe 10 years ago, even when Shirley Chisholm was trying to chisel out some type of power within women and and announcing that, we can be in the White House too. Mm-hmm. It just, I had to think about that because every time we walked, the assistant pastor was a male, and the main pastor that made all of the decisions were a male, and trustees and deacons. My father was a trustee for 57 years. There were no female. So we, like she said when she spoke, we were never acknowledged as someone who could run a company like I'm, a business like I'm running, and bring in these faith leaders. Mm-hmm. And I forgot who asked on the program, not only Dr. B, but it was the fact that I don't understand how you pulled all these people, and then for them to think that we could make a difference in Black women and children's lives. And you convinced us of that. And evidently, that workshop, when she described it as sensitive, I bet you that was a tough workshop. I bet you she opened some eyes. And she's such a gentle spirit.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Let me read you some more of what you wrote. She said, what SAFI, the South African Family and Faith Institute, seeks to do is tackle the root causes of oppression and violence, byproducts of the twin evils of white supremacy and patriarchy. Powerful statement. It was a concept Peterson said she struggled with as she began to learn English at the collegiate level. In 2009, she says, we officially set out to train field workers that were supposed to be facilitators. I wanted them to start out in their own communities and introduce the work of SAFI to faith leaders through a sensitive workshop. This kind of work had never been done before. the questions the workers confronted had more to do with patriarchy than the critical work needing to be addressed in changing mindsets of how women and children should be treated, she said. The shelter was only the first part of their work. She had to convince the women that a Black male should work in the shelter and to be a role model for the children. It really set me up for the critical work of helping faith leaders understand what belief system governs them and discover what God expects of us in our intimate lives and relationships.
Oh, that sounds really good.
See what you think.
But before you stop reading, make for sure Dr. B hears that last paragraph. That's a tribute to her.
We'll come back to that for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. B, impressions, thoughts?
All I could say is what an excellent writer.
Oh,
she captured not just the words and the information, but the spirit of the conversation.
Well, I felt her, Dr. B.
I felt you feeling her.
her.
Yeah, I felt you feeling her just through the use of words that you put on that paper.
And I'm writing one now on Dr. Brooke Cunningham because she was pretty tough from the Department of Health. But I just felt everything she was saying. Mm-hmm. But I still have to pay tribute to my boss for giving me the opportunity to write an article like that. Yeah, so thank you, Al McFarlane, Alfie Jr. But no, it was, she was tough. Yeah. And I meant that by that mystical ambiance, Dr. B, because you could just feel her surrounded with the Creator.
Yep.
I mean, I get mad at him sometime. I just say, you know what? I'm tired. And then I go to sleep. But you can feel him.
Let me read a little bit more. Okay. She goes on to say, it's like some people of faith really don't want to engage with their own humanity, a reminder of their own darkness. Mm-hmm. She said that she asked the faith leaders who had come aboard, why do you focus on certain theological questions and Sunday school stories? Why have you gone on for decades preaching the same themes that can easily be misinterpreted and that don't serve the people? Where are the resources within your own faith tradition? She goes on to say that that's the essence of our work. We've developed training over the years, and it's very much merged with academic research and practice. The two speak to each other. The main focus must be the work of mental health and faith practitioners. We cannot ask a magistrate to clarify scripture, like if a man says, the Bible says, I am the head of the home and women must submit. Or if a woman, a victim, a survivor says, but I am married and we are of one flesh. But she knows, and everyone else knows, that he's sleeping around and is sexually violating her. We cannot ask social workers or the police to make sense of it all. It's the sacred responsibility of faith leaders to fill that role, Peterson said. SAFI creates safe spaces for religious heads to critically reflect on theologies that inform the way we interact with people, with each other, in intimate relationships. I think that's powerful. And so she calls on leaders from all faiths to support survivors and also to hold perpetrators fully accountable and to offer the possibility of healing with them too. I'll stop there and we'll read some more in a few minutes. Brenda, Dr. B, just comment, thoughts, impressions as you hear it.
Yeah, when I think about it, what I see and hear in that language is the idea of a sacred responsibility. Just like she said, she had that sacred calling. I know many pastors feel that sacred calling. And understanding what it means from a space outside themselves is what she does. She challenges them to make your theology, your belief, a reality of wellness. Because when I think about what I learned about scriptures, and especially the most important ones to me are around Jesus and the cross, where they say by his stripes we are healed. They say that he was on the cross in his last days asking the Father, please forgive them because they know not what they do. So if you are a minister and you are having people in your congregation, which you do because of the statistics, tell us it's there, who are engaged in intimate partner violence, child abuse, neglect, all of those problems that create curses on the next generation. And you're holding that sacred space. It is your divine responsibility, that appointment that God made for you to be in that space must be used to honor him and to help people find their way in the dark, to find their way to understanding what those scriptures mean. And I love that she was talking about them being accountable, not just to themselves, but to the God who made them. And so to me as a psychologist, I find that I do that work myself every day. I have people who come and say, I know you're not a pastor, like we were talking a minute ago when I was saying, can I get an amen? But they say, but I do know that you believe in God. And I said, not only that, but you've got a praying psychologist in me. You don't know, when you come to my office and you've got problems, I touch your file with my hands and I say, God, here she is back. But while I hold her in this space, give me the spirit, the wisdom, the words to take her back to you. Every client, now we do it on our computer, but it used to do it on a paper file, but I still do. Sometimes I'll do it on the door. And what people don't know is that there are ritual components to healing. To healing. And I see that pastors, their sermons aren't the end of the healing. Their sermons are the beginning.
You got to go in your office and talk about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Dr. B, I think of you, I've written about you for over 2 years. And the one image that comes through is when your mother went to the doctor's office and you were sitting in the lobby.
Yep.
And you walked up to that psychologist in your mother's doctor's office. And you said, well, what do you do? Here's this little black girl, 9 or 10 years old? And you said, well, guess what? I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Now, Mama put creator in daughter and son, because your brother is impressive. Douglas,
yes,
really impressive. So, she put that just like Dr. Peterson's mother and father. It was like, okay, we might not have had these steps, but you do. But your mother was profound. My mother went to a one-room schoolhouse. I have a picture of it. And I know how powerful that connection is. But I remembered that image, Dr. B, and it was like, I'm in Texas and there are dirt roads and maybe one street sign and the whole bit. But guess what? And look at you now. And you were like Dr. And I'm not, I love you.
Yes, I do.
Between you and Diana Hawkins, y'all are my sheroes. But it's like, I don't know what it is, but you had a calling too. And you said they're not treating our children right.
That's right.
And so I have to give them tools. And I have to use what my mother taught me in that one-room schoolhouse
Mhm.
and that cold chocolate milk.
Oh, you remember that? Oh my goodness.
Yep. Yep. I'm a writer, honey. I remember all of the details, and I have a good teacher at 75 years of age,
Wow.
you know. But anyway, I remember all of it. And Dr. Peterson was the same way.
Yes, she
Had
was.
this calling.
Mhm.
And it's just beautiful. It really is. He
Mhm.
just waited a little late for me to be able to write. But, as I tell my daughters, I don't think we go up in heaven and say, okay, God, before you send me to earth, this is how I want my life to be. It doesn't happen that way. So anyway, we have to be in gratitude for what we have and the fact that we're still on this side of the dirt.
That's right.
So bravo. Bravo. And thank you, Al, because you're kind of lifting my spirits here. But it was a good piece. I enjoyed writing that.
Well,
I really did.
it comes through, and that's the joy of being a writer. Let me read a little bit more from what you wrote, Brenda. You said that I started this before. Peterson calls upon leaders from all faiths to support survivors, hold perpetrators fully accountable, and offer the possibility of healing for them too. Let me change pages here on my computer. Just a second. We as people of faith need to break the silence and break the acts of violence against women and children. I call upon all faith leaders to step into true leadership on this issue. We must take a stand. We must be in alignment with God, she said. And here's the last paragraph you talked about.
Yeah, that's what I wanted her to hear.
But I'm going to also go back and read the very first paragraph. So it was great that you opened up the way you did. But you ended the article, Brenda, by saying, and Dr. B closed the Healing Circle program saying, open quote, we acknowledge these special moments with our sister, Dr. Elizabeth Peterson, and are in gratitude for having received acclamation, confirmation, affirmation, and the gift of substantiation, which connects all human beings to all living things, the earth, the wind, and everything around us. As we enjoy the knowledge of connection, we are never alone. We're always present in a greater I am because we are. And we are because I am. And so it is. Wow. Woo. Good job, Brenda. And
Yeah, but look at my subjects.
That is some beautiful, beautiful writing.
You got a bunch of strength there with the Dr. Oliver Williams and Dr. B and what a honor to meet Elizabeth Peterson.
Well, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the article too to share because I think it's a great opening too. And you wrote that our protocol convening the Healing Circle is how we should be engaged with each other, said Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya, founder and CEO of the African American Child Wellness Institute and co-host of the Friday edition of The Conversation with Al McFarlane. In our African cultural tradition, important conversations take place in a circle where everyone has equal access to the center, which is the place of power. We refute the hierarchical nature of the way power is not shared in American tradition. Although virtually assembled, we can spiritually envision our connection in that circle, she said. We acknowledge that we reside on land stolen from our Lakota brethren. We honor our elders because it is their shoulders we stand on and because they are closest to our ancestors. We honor our ancestors because they are closest to the Creator, she said. And we pass the virtual talking stick among our hosts and guests. We welcome new knowledge through the disbursement of trusted and often vital information from a variety of ethnic backgrounds and philosophical perspectives coming from wonderful connections in the Twin Cities and around the country and around the world. Like our special guest today, Dr. Elizabeth Horn Peterson, founder and director of South African Faith and Family Institute. Well, that's how the article began, but the whole article from top to bottom, front to back, I think accurately and in a very spiritual way, an appropriate way, connected and reflected an important conversation that we were engaged in, one that was going on and one that is critical. So, kudos again, Brenda, kudos.
And to her.
Yeah,
And
kudos,
to
Dr.
you.
C. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Unbelievable.
It was.
Unbelievable.
And what I like about the article and this ensuing conversation that we're having today,
Mhm.
it tells you that implantation of knowledge and spirit continues to grow and evolve. And it does that once it's planted on fertile ground.
Mhm.
Our spirits were receptive. We were open mentally, psychologically, spiritually to hearing and to learning and continuing. And that doesn't stop with us, because now everybody who's getting the insight paper, they're getting the feeling. Everybody looking at conversations with Al Healing Circle, they're catching that spirit.
Mhm.
And I love the idea of this. What do you want? A cosmic whirlpool that goes
what a
further
great
and further
term.
and further, right? That's what's happening.
Mhm.
And it's
Wow.
worth the breath that we put into it. It's beautiful. Thank you for that seed of healing that's growing and evolving, Sister Brenda.
But
And Brother
Dr.
Al,
D,
you
you
always
got to remember, you have put all of this on our hearts. You started Healing Circle. Cheryl-Lynn, came to you, and I missed my friend.
yeah,
I'm
she'll be back.
thinking of the voting, and I keep thinking of Cheryl-Lynn saying, "Don't you complain if you don't get out there and vote." She said that for a year.
That's
But
right.
you have to remember, and I think all of us are praying that the spirit and this knowledge rolls into our children, and especially the millenniums, because spiritually, and I think of my own daughters, they're in gratitude and they're in love for God, but that connection is not like we used to have.
Mhm.
It was like, it wasn't an ugly fear. It was like a moral fear. You don't do certain things, and you don't let your anger of Blackness dictate how you're going to proceed in your destiny. And we didn't let it stop us, because our parents didn't let us stop. And neither did, like I said, our principal, our teachers, and our pastors. Antichrist kind of rolled into the churches decades later, but we still have that same moral standard, and Black women still believe they can rise. I know I do. And I've been through the darkness. I've been trying to get the waves out of my way. And I just want my daughters on their feet before I leave this side of the dirt. But again, I didn't say, God, before you send me down there, can I write everything out? It doesn't happen like that.
That's right.
But I am concerned about our children, just like you are. And it's very hurtful. But we're going to do better. I have hope. I loved my president, and Barack will always be my president, and Michelle will always be my first lady.
Mine too.
But children came first, and the way they raised their children in the White House, and the way Michelle handled herself. I thought it was so mean when the Trumps came in, and the first thing they did was to wipe out the garden. And I'm saying, look at what she did for wellness and nutrition, and
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's so
Love
cool.
I
Oh
love that.
wow.
Have you seen that? She was on
No.
No.
yesterday. She was on, I think, the View, and she's promoting her new book. This is April Ryan. The new book is Black Women Will Save the World.
Mhm.
And
Wow,
it was
what
just a
a
wonderful hearing
picture.
her. I'm going to try to reach out to get her on our show because she's promoting the book, but just to hear what she had to say, and she's speaking from a place of both authority, of being inside the inside of the inside as part of the White House press corps, and having been there
Oh,
for a long, long time, and having
Mhm.
been in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. Power Center for a long, long time,
Mhm.
having withstood, excoriation, basically banishment from time to time for telling the truth and telling her.
Mhm.
But she has come back stronger than ever and proclaiming what she knows. And
Mhm.
what she knows is that Black women will save the world.
well, Stacy did.
Yep.
Look at her 100,000
Yep.
votes.
Well,
It never would have happened had
yep.
she not said, oh no, we're not going down like this.
That's right.
And in her interview, she was so elegant. I mean, she was a Katanji. And I was so proud of her, no
Mhm.
matter what happens. It was such message to our children.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't give up no matter what.
What?
God created you for a reason and a purpose, and you are destined, and you are challenged, and you are supposed to fulfill that purpose that He gave you. That's the reason you're still alive.
That's
And
right.
I mean, I love it. I love
You
it.
talking about Dr. BB in the pulpit? I think both y'all.
Yeah, but
Everybody
both of
preaching today,
you
boy.
have
I'm
taught
telling
me
you.
so much. You
Mm-mm-mm.
really have. I wouldn't be writing this way if it were not for you. But it's time.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for us. I'm doing a piece right now on what is at stake. I had to ask Al, when he was going to do his endorsement. And by the way, the ad with the team, with Governor Walz's team, that was a beautiful ad. I don't know who did that, but it was really great.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked him when he was going to endorse, and I thought, I said, we have to let them know, the readers and the viewers, in a way that they can understand what is at stake
Steak.
if we don't vote.
That's right.
What price did our ancestors pay for us to have that right?
And we have, for the past 50 years, endorsed at every election cycle,
I
locally,
think it's great.
nationally. So we do that. We take our job, our responsibility seriously.
Mhm.
And part of our role is to both clarify, illuminate, shine a light on, criticize, but also offer our assessment, our recommendations, our endorsement for voters to at least consider as
Mhm.
they move to their polling place to cast their vote for the future. So we do that. Well, let's
I
move
love the Haiti. The Haiti was beautiful.
which piece, the piece on which one?
The one that
Is it,
is it Jesus?
yeah, Jesus, yeah,
Yeah,
Chucho,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That Al, that's a smart move. I don't know how it's going to be expanded. I
Mhm.
don't know if you go and take a stack of papers to the Somali community or just what, but that's a good move.
Well, she's talking about the fact that we have a section in the paper called Afrodescendientes, and
That's right.
I've said several times that we started off as English Spanish, but we expanded it to be Yoruba, also to include Portuguese, because our friend Yoji is in Bahia, who's with us regularly, and we expanded it to include French, because a lot of West Africa was French controlled, and
Mhm.
it's Francophone, they call it. And so we've got about 7 different languages that we take one
Right.
article that is created originally in Spanish. I translate to English. Yogi translates to Portuguese, and I've got a resource in Africa that's translating to Swahili, to Yoruba, and to French, I think, and one more. So it's experimental. This is innovation. I've seen this done in books that translate and transcribe ancient texts, but I haven't seen it in the current affairs formation that we're in right now with Inside News. So we'll see. I think the promise is that 2 things. One is that a family picks up the free paper out in front of their house, they bring it in, and a 9-year-old looks at it and says to mom or dad, "What's this?" Yeah, or he or she maybe is in a beginning Spanish class and say, look, mom, I can read this part. And if she or he is able to read that, they might spark the curiosity. Well, what about, does this mean that in Yoruba? Or does this mean that in French? Or does this mean that? And so we begin to see in our imagination our capacity to own a variety of idioms, of idiomatic expressions, and that this is not something that's difficult. You know, Brenda, I always said that for any language, if a 5-year-old can speak it, I can speak it.
That's right.
I
That's
don't care what-
beautiful.
I don't care what
And when
language.
you go to the motherland, those children are speaking 3 and 4 languages.
Yeah, well, any language in the world. I mean, the attitude is the important thing. The attitude is that, and our people say, "Oh, I can't do German, I can't do Russian, I can't do Chinese."
Oh, I wish I learned Spanish.
My point is, if a 5-year-old
You can do it.
even today, I can speak it. That's the bottom line.
That's right.
The attitude. I can
It
learn.
was so funny.
Anyway.
Dr. B, he broke out in Spanish. I forgot what guest we had because there have been so many profound people.
Yeah.
But he broke out in Spanish, and this woman said, "Huh?" And I mean, he rolled it out.
Yeah.
And I told you, Seth, I said, "Look at him just showing
off."
He delivered a
I was so
presentation.
proud of him, though. He rolled those R's.
Yeah.
Not as good as Carmen, but he rolled those R's.
I delivered a presentation to the annual meeting of the Black Press of America at a time we were trying to create and still are building on strategic cooperation between the Black press and the Latino press. And so I was at that time the incoming chairman of the National Newspaper Publishers Association Foundation, and had a chance to make opening remarks for our joint reception. And I kind of surprised everybody because I delivered the entire thing in Spanish. I walked up, and so the brothers that were there were saying, "What? Is he doing this?" And the Latino people who were there were saying, "What?" But
That's so funny.
I just threw down, and I enjoyed it.
I'll listen to
Listen,
him,
we're out
Dr.
of time.
B, going back.
How come we be out of
I
time?
just threw
It's like we
down.
finally started the conversation.
I
We're out
loved
of
it.
time.
But he started studying in junior high Spanish,
Mhm,
and I didn't grab that.
mhm.
Yeah, I was too busy being artistic and writing children's books. But anyway, it was great. It was great.
Remember Josie Mitchell? Is that her name?
Yeah.
Josie? She lived on my block. She
Yep.
was in Spanish class with me,
Yep.
and that was cool. I can't remember who else was in that class, but it was a good
Joanna
meeting.
Alexander is, and she came out of the class, I think, of 66,
Okay.
but she's fluent in Spanish.
Mhm.
And it was so funny because she was working, and she started out at Central learning Spanish.
Mhm.
So she was working in this bank, and they were talking about her in Spanish and whatever, and they didn't know that she understood every word they said.
Mhm.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
But anyway,
So we're going to be showing today. I think Diana was here. I tried to send the link to her for her to join the program, but she had sent a post in the comments. Thank you, Diana. Diana conducted and wasn't able to do it like I normally do, the monthly meeting of the Northside Urban Coalition. That's a group of leaders in the community that focuses on opioid and other abuses that ravish our community. That meeting also gives an update from the 4th Precinct, our friends at the 4th Precinct, and some of the legacy institutions. Today, our friends from Turning Point were presenting, among others. Well, we're going to play the program as soon as we get done here. So stick around. If you got time, you'll hear a wonderful community meeting, the Northside Urban Coalition meeting that happened this morning at 11 o'clock. And if you can't watch it right now, that's okay. You can always come back and watch it. But the bottom line is we're using this technology to create connections, to figure out how we can be with each other more and in a way that is substantial, it's productive, proactive, and beyond. I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Dr. B. Thank you, Brenda. And those who are listening and watching, do the favor, share, like. We've got some new people coming on board next week too, who are social media experts, and their assignment is to help us grow the number of people we reach. We want to build subscribers and viewers and get more likes. So if there's somebody listening that is expert in that arena of social media, help us out. Get on board and let's grow this global community. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Much love, Dr. B.
You too.